Quentin Tarantino, the man, the legend, the one that revolutionized the way we see movies and the way that movies are made. Cinema would raise him, and then he would grow up to revolutionize and remake cinema in his likeness, taking inspiration from all over the planet of cinematic adventures, adding his own spark and imagination and script writing of amazing proportions, and then shooting it back out onto the silver screen for our entertainment in a way that is better than it ever could have been otherwise. An artist, an actor, a director, a producer, and someone that has made some of the best movies on the planet, in my opinion. He's a man of controversy that people are constantly trying to pick him down, pick him apart, and get him to admit some sort of faults of having Hollywood violence.
I have to say about it, they can Google me, and they can look for 20 years what I have to say about it. I haven't changed my opinion one iota.
It's absolutely ridiculous. He's a filmmaker that has been used as an scapegoat by many, both politicians and weird interviewers alike, not unlike Eminem's picket signs from his first debut.
You go the further step, and that's the movies. You see these movies, they're so violent.
But like Eminem, he is so good at what he does that over the years, most have come to know him as a storytelling cinematic genius, and pretty much a national treasure, at least in my opinion. I think I've loved all the movies he's been a part of, but the best ones he wrote, directed, picked the cast and crew, and even the editor, and then sat in on that edit. Plus there's always a cameo. His ability to hand select the right people for the right jobs, delegate those jobs, and then have a hands-off approach once he's pushed them in the right direction is almost unheard of in an industry that's filled with studio execs trying to milk the situation and directors that won't take input from anybody but those executives and their own brain, with egos as large as life but fragile as glass.
What is that? Now that you've done it, I gotta keep it. It was like, good. Yeah,
They turn it into the poetry that it was always supposed to be.
He's the one director that still makes me excited to go see his movie on the big screen despite the year of its release. Though I started watching his films as far back as I can remember, remembering family members saying that I shouldn't be watching it when I was a kid, while also overhearing my uncles and other people saying how great his movies were, bringing a young Sean to seek out those movies to see for myself, to then be so pleasantly surprised to know that it's actually better than I could have ever foreseen, going on to influence me in ways I don't even know to this day. That said, and even with all the interviews and videos that are out there about the man, I still have very many questions. One simple question would be, is how did he get this way? What made him like this? What made Quentin Tarantino Quentin Tarantino? Now, because I'm not a mind reader, and sadly I don't even know the guy, plus the fact that it's hard to know your own psychology, nonetheless look into someone else's, I'm gonna leave it up to you to come to any sort of conclusion of what his psychology is like and who is Tarantino and what makes Tarantino Tarantino, which is an unanswerable question. Only he can say what makes him, but that's not going to stop us from speculating. Quentin Tarantino was born on March 27th, 1963 in Knoxville, Tennessee. He is the only child of Connie McHugh and actor Tony Tarantino, who left his family before Quentin was born to pursue his own acting career, in which he failed. What a dick.
We do not have a good relationship.
In 1966, when Tarantino was around 3, him and his mom got up and moved to Los Angeles, California. Kind of makes you think, was his mom like chasing his dad, or I don't know. His mother, being single, would go on lots of date nights, and they would take little Quentin along to the movie theater. Perfect place to go on a date and take your kid. Probably convenient for both of them. I think this probably gave Quentin a sense of stability, something that was constant in his life, if I had to guess into the psychology of it. He said a lot of times he got to see movies that other kids didn't. For instance, he was able to go see The Deliverance one night.
I've always said that, like, if you don't really have a big family, you kind of make your own family. For like a long time was a friend of my mom's best friend, Jackie, boyfriend, girlfriend, for 2 seconds. She moved into the house as a boarder, all right? And my mom was going to be gone for a while. And she thought, well, you know, Floyd's a male influence on Quentin and everything.
Right, Floyd Wilson.
Yeah, he was a cool guy. We were very close for, a period of time and everything. So he took me down that avenue. And actually, but I guess as far as like sense of honor of like who you are, I guess, is somebody I've never met. All right, and it's funny how that works.
At the age of 14, it said that he wrote his earliest screenplay, inspired by the film Smokey and the Bandits. Seeming pretty self-aware in my opinion, the name was Captain Peach Fuzz and the Acne Bandits. His mother would ridicule him for writing this, saying that his writing skills basically sucked, which led Tarantino to vow to never share his future wealth with her.
You know, she said, and by the way, this little writing career, all right, with the finger quotes, this little writing career that you're doing, that is over. And when she said that to me in that sarcastic way, I was in my head and I go, when I become a successful writer, you will never see penny one from my success. There'll be no house for you. There's no vacation for you, no Elvis Cadillac for mommy. You get nothing.
All kids, and especially boys, can be extremely mean to their parents at that age. However, it does seem that he stuck to it, as cruel as that sound, only ever helping his mom out with the IRS, which was just that, and many years after he got famous and wealthy. Little Quentin grew up with the name Zastapil after his stepdad until he would change it later because he just thought Tarantino sounded better. Later he said if he could start all over again, he'd go by Jerome, which is his middle name. I'm sure he's the only one that could tell you the significance of all this in his head, and I bet he wouldn't. The literature says that he did have a stepdad, and there are other scenarios that he sort of mentions him at times. And the man they talk about took him to a whole bunch of movies. His mom married a musician soon after moving to California named Curtis Zastapil. Then they would move to Torrance, California. And on top of that, it seems that he used the last name. It was Quentin Zastapil, and then once he decided to become an actor, he changed his name to Tarantino, which was his biological father's last name, who he had never met, and grandfather's, who was also an actor. They got divorced at some point, and she dated a lot of people. They always went to the movies, and that was kind of the source of, I think, comfort. Little Quentin grew up with the name Zastapil until he would end up changing it later because he just thought Tarantino sounded better. Later he said if he could start all over again, he'd go by Jerome, which is his middle name. I can't help but to wonder if his grandfather and his father using the last name Tarantino had any influence on his choice to also use that name. Maybe he thought there was a chance that it could crack a door open for him. But that's not the story that we're told, and in fact there's no interview that I'm aware of that he says anything along these lines. And there's no reason for me not to believe the story that we're told of him basically coming up from the ground up and making himself into what he is. That said, even the slightest of association with something positive or even otherwise, especially in Hollywood, could do wonders for your career over a lifetime in ripple effects. It makes very little difference, as his dedication and genius for the craft is so large that it's kind of irrelevant, especially at this point. He said his heroes were directors, writers, and producers, but that he wanted to be an actor, as they were the ones that he saw on screen and got embedded in Little Quentin's mind. He didn't really even think about writing a script or consider if he had what it took to make a movie. Who knows, maybe because of that incident with his mom, it got his self-esteem down. But perhaps it gave him the drive later on to make the movies we all know and love. Much later, in his early 20s, he would join an acting class in his pursuit to break into Hollywood. And of course, when he wasn't acting, he'd be still watching movies at the movie theater. One of the things that they would do would be to play out different scenes of movies they liked. So Quentin was watching movies, then coming home and reinterpreting them through his own writing. Like, he would watch a scene and then come back home, write it down, but then he would also add to it and reinterpret it in the way that he wanted to.
Basically, I always had a good memory. So I would see a scene from a movie and I would just remember it. And I would go home and I'd write it from memory. And anything else I couldn't remember or anything else good I came up with, I'd add it into the scene because it was just my scene. I started adding more and more and more to the scenes. And that was me learning how to write dialogue, or just me realizing that I could write dialogue.
And he was so good at this that most people didn't catch him when they were doing their practice at class. But it led to one day when one person did catch him and said, "Dang, Quentin, you got a knack for it," because your writing and their writing blend in so well that I could barely tell, and the only reason that I was able to tell is because I'm familiar with the script that we're doing.
A member of the class, a guy named Ronnie Coleman, I think, is Quentin. You're really good. You're as good as Patty Chayefsky.
In the early to mid 80s, he was going from job to job like many young people do, and he would quit those jobs if they didn't involve movies. One of the jobs that he had was an adult movie theater that he lied about his age to get in, and it's like, well, at least it involves movies.
I was a customer there, and I really liked it. And eventually he asked me if I wanted a job. And I was like, yeah, I'd love a job here. This would be a dream. And it was until I became a director, it was the best job I'd ever had. And I ended up working there for like 5 years.
He was going to do what he was going to do no matter what. And that didn't matter if he was going to make a lot or a little. A Hollywood blockbuster or something just cheap on the side, sort of just an art piece with what he got. Even though he was a lot of the times getting paid near, if not minimum wage, he was still saving every penny to put his money where his brain was, which was the movies. He was absolutely obsessed, yes, but it was a choice that he probably wouldn't be able to make if he had kids or something like that, but a choice nonetheless. He could have given up, and it wasn't about the money, because a lot of people might see an easier path to get a bunch of money, but that's not what it was about for him. He was committed, no matter if that meant that he was a broke artist filmmaker or what inevitably happened, becoming like one of the greatest producer, directors, writers of all time. He ended up at the Video Archives in 1986, which in my mind seems like the perfect place for the universe to have put him. Now, all that studying and all the learning about different directors and actors that he naturally did since he was a child was paying off.
If you don't go to college, you'll find it somewhere else. And in that, it became Video Archives.
He would co-write and direct My Best Friend's Birthday that same year. And this film's kind of weird because it was kind of like a shock value party film from my understanding. And this is the film that has like the weird scenes of Quentin doing strange dialogue when he was pretty young, floating around on the internet. Then he'd go on to write the script that eventually became True Romance, and part of that was also Natural Born Killers. The original script having a character that was loosely based on himself if he had a girlfriend, he would later explain in an interview, where the character was a comic book writer making a graphic novel that was Natural Born Killer. So it was basically True Romance, very similar to how the movie ended up, with that character writing Natural Born Killers as the graphic novel, and would kind of like go into the other story and then back out to True Romance being in the real life and Natural Born Killers being in the graphic novel.
And that very first script of True Romance is also the script for Natural Born Killers. Roger Avery is the only person who ever lived who read that version of the script.
Tarantino co-wrote Lovebirds in Bondage with Scott McGill. Then he would go on to produce and co-direct the short film. McGill tragically went underground in 1987, and sadly it's said that he destroyed most of the footage. The film's plot revolves around a young woman who gets in an accident. Sort of goes through a Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of thing. You can look it up. I think his obsession and his persistence is obviously what gives him his competitive advantage. Like, you might have a lot of people that have a dream to be a cinematographer or be a writer, director, and even the successful ones, they're just as obsessed in a lot of ways, and they're just as committed in a lot of ways. But Quentin is like weirdly obsessed about movies and directors and the ins and outs, and it's like, this gives him a huge competitive advantage just because he has like this huge knowledge base in his head. He doesn't have to like look it up or have ChatGPT tell him something. It's like he is so into it that it's just like a memory that he pulls out. He sold True Romance first in the early 90s, which was sort of his big break in the fact that it helped provide the first layer of funding for his script that he was going to direct, Reservoir Dogs, which of course became his first like real Tarantino film. It's just so many hours and hours and hours. He's been in the spotlight for a very long time. There's interviews and podcasts and articles and pictures and this and that, and you know, this is just his early life. I could do a whole nother video similar to this about the next stage, but I feel like that is much more known. We all know that after Reservoir Dogs that he did Pulp Fiction. We all know that he went on to make more movies that did extremely well, and he became one of the most famous people in Hollywood ever. There's a controversial direction I could go with the whole Harvey Weinstein thing, which I don't even know if I should say that dude's name on YouTube, but they were closer I would like to even think about. Quentin Tarantino's style when it comes to his movies and projects stands out in the way of that his personality and his psychology is mixed in with the movies that he makes. I think all filmmakers have their own way of portraying the work that they're doing, just like any artist, just like your own walk or the way you drive. Everything is individual, but some people do it a little bit more, a little bit different. And I think one of the reasons why Tarantino's films stand out so much more than other people's is because he puts so much of himself in it. He's already naturally obsessed with the stuff. He would have obsessed about the craft no matter what happened in his life. And because he writes, directs, produced, and even acts cameos in his own films, they really are part of his soul. If he's going through something in real life when he's writing a script, it makes its way into the script. And he has said on numerous occasions that if it doesn't, then he would be doing something wrong, at least to him. A good movie makes you feel happy that you spent the money to go see it, but a great movie makes you feel something you weren't expecting to feel and makes you maybe even see life in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have. But if you like this video, maybe you'll like my last video, and maybe you'll like my next video, and who knows, we could be symbiotic on the internet. So it's enough out of me for this one. I think there's plenty more to be said about Tarantino, and there's lots of people saying it. So I'll either see you in the next video, or I'll see you in the next life, but hopefully in the next video.